Hi everybody, it's Ashley. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have a book review for you for Little Lovely Things by Maureen Joyce Connelly. I have some very, very strong and very, very deep feelings about this book. So let's just get on into it. Little Lovely Things is the debut novel of Maureen Joyce Connelly, and it has a very interesting premise. This follows the story of a woman named Claire who, on a routine average day, is taking her children to school, and she is ill, so she stops at this gas station briefly to make herself be sick, or allow herself to be sick. And her daughters are asleep in the back seat of the car, and she doesn't think anything of it. When she comes out, her car is gone, and so are her babies. So, I mean, it's really gripping in that way. It's a good premise. It's a good setup. It really, really draws you in, and you're wondering what's going on with the girls, and it's a very strong plotline. But this has a lot of negatives as well. In this book, we have several POVs. We have Claire herself. We have a perspective from a man named Jay White, who ends up in essence becoming a family friend. We have a perspective of one of the daughters, and also from one of the kidnappers. And it follows a span of 5 years. That alone doesn't bother me. I like stuff with this type of draw in and with time jumps. Like, I actually enjoy that quite a lot. But the way that it was handled in this book seemed almost unnecessary. And what I mean by that is, when the book was good, it was great. But there was a significant amount of time where this just drug, and it was mundane, and there wasn't a lot going on. And despite its short length, it was coming across as quite boring. Claire is told by the police not too long after her girls go missing that they are both passed away. They're both gone. But the body was only found of one of them. So even though she's been given proof that her other daughter is gone as well, she still feels in her heart that she is not. And the man who found her daughter, her youngest daughter, Lily, is Jay White. And he's probably my favorite character in this entire book. He's amazing, very well written. But he finds her youngest daughter, and he has a slight second sight. It's not overly pronounced. It's more of a feeling that he has. And he had something that led him to her body, and he became attached to the family and to the case, and started getting his feelings pretty steadily after. He became very good friends with Claire, and even though he had never met the girls, he felt very attached to them. He felt as though he knew them. And his gut is telling him that the oldest daughter, Andrea, is alive, and that she was taken by a woman. But this completely contradicts what the police have told her. They told her that they found one of her teeth and the charred remains of the dress that she was wearing when she went missing. So they believe that she was burned to dispose of the body. And Claire she's torn between believing the police or believing Jay, because she has dreams where her daughter is reaching out to her. And I mean, that it's very, very sweet and very gripping, like just dealing with that strong sense of loss and hope. And I really, really enjoyed that part of the story. It was very well orchestrated and written. And there are some very strong characters in here. So I don't want to make it sound like I absolutely hated this book, because I didn't. There was a lot about it that I did like. And the characters were probably the strongest. I will say that Claire herself, as the main character, she was my least favorite. And while I sympathize with her, she also just acted in ways and did a lot of things that I couldn't really agree with throughout the course of the book. And it's really, really hard to get engaged in a story when you don't really like the main character. And I didn't hate her by any means. She'd been through a lot, and I definitely did not blame her for the girls being taken, and she blames herself for that. She's like, if I'd never left them in the car, this wouldn't have happened. But she was extremely sick, so I don't blame her for that at all. It was more her actions afterwards, her attitude towards her husband, her attitude towards people around her. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. Like, it was understandable at first, but it's like 5 years later, she's still acting like that. And that was the main part of the 5 years later, you know what I mean? And it didn't sit very well with me. But when we go into the other point of views, they're a little bit more interesting. I particularly like the 5-year flash forward from the oldest daughter's point of view, because it's very interesting. You don't see this a lot actually in fiction, where you actually get that point of view. But now it's 5 years later. She is 9 years old and has been renamed Collie. She's living with the woman named Moira, and they are jet setting all over the country. They're drifting, and Collie doesn't really know why, but obviously it's because Moira doesn't want them to be found out. And like, Collie does think it's weird, like their name changes every time. Their last name, they still use the same first names, but their last name changes every time they move somewhere new, and they're never somewhere for any long. But this is one very, very lonely little girl, because she is extremely isolated, and she's spunky, she's sassy, but she doesn't have any other children to play with. She has Moira, and she has her favorite doll that she kind of like envisions into being like her best friend, which little girls play with their dolls, so I mean, it's not that out there, but it's extremely sad the level she takes it to, because it's literally the only companionship she has. Moira uses her more as a servant than a child. Collie has a very good talent for painting, and Moira is like constantly making her work on paintings to sell, because she's that good at it, and she wants her to do the cooking and the cleaning. Now, Moira does work. She has a couple of different jobs, but Collie has to do everything else. And we're talking about a 9-year-old little girl. She doesn't go to school. She isn't taught anything. She was told that her parents were drug addicts that did not want her, and the reason that they have to move around is because somebody might try to take her away from Moira, because she wasn't legally adopted. And she doesn't question this. She was too young. She doesn't really remember anything. And she puts her trust in this woman, and she does love her, even though their existence is kind of messed up. But she literally doesn't have anything to compare it to. She doesn't know any better. So her points of view, like I really, really enjoyed reading things from her side. It was an interesting take on this type of a story, and I felt for this child so hard. I can't even really describe it. It's just, I felt for her so deep down in my bones. Um, we have another point of view from Moira, which is the woman that is raising Andrea / Collie. And she goes through periods of really seeming to have a lot of affection for the girl. And that was the reason she took her in the first place, because she couldn't have children of her own. And when she saw Claire stumbling and being sick, getting out of the car, she assumed that she was high on something. And she was like, she doesn't deserve those children. And, well, we know what happens from there. So it's like her intentions may have been good, but her actions definitely were not. But then she also goes through periods of resentment because she is struggling financially and she's having to pick up her life every few months and take off somewhere new. And she has fleeting thoughts of what would happen if I just left. This child is so ungrateful. I do all of this for her. And she's not really realizing that this girl's getting old enough to know that something isn't quite right, and she feels a sense of loss even though she doesn't understand where it's coming from. So Moira just kind of goes back and forth between these two emotions, and I don't really I don't like her, but I don't hate her either. She's not evil, but she's definitely made some very wrong decisions. And there's absolutely no doubt about that. And then, of course, we have Jay's point of view, like how his friendship with Claire blossoms over the years and the way he thinks about the girls. And it's very, very sweet that he's so attached to something that he didn't encounter until the aftermath. Okay, so now that we have the setup out of the way and the positives, the things that I did like about the story out of the way, let's get into the not so great. I'm going to go ahead and put in a spoiler alert here because I'm going to be talking very heavily about the ending of this book because that's where a lot of my issues are. So if you don't want to see that, I suggest you go ahead and click off now. But I'm going to go ahead and get into that now. So the middle section of the book, there wasn't a lot of action happening. It was more like jumping back and forth between the POVs and seeing basically what everybody is up to. And that was fine for a couple of chapters, but I felt like it went a little bit too long. And I started to lose my interest, and I was actually reading other things because this one wasn't really reaching out to me anymore until I got to a point where I got really invested again. And that is when, by some miracle, Jay moves in across the street from Collie and Moira. That might seem a little far-fetched to some people. It's like, how would that possibly happen? But he also drifts a lot. He didn't even have a permanent address when he met Claire. He just happened to be passing through. So it's not that strange of a possibility. But instantly, he forms a bond with Collie. Like, he doesn't even understand what it is. He just feels drawn to her, and he feels bad for her because she's always home alone, and she doesn't seem very happy, and he wants to say something, but he doesn't feel like it's his place, so he just decides to like really keep a close eye on her. And so I really started to get into the book again, and because I was like, he's gonna figure it out, and I could not wait for that to happen. And when it finally did, it was exciting, it was intense. And then everything just kind of went downhill and really ruined the reading experience for me. So, again, before I go forward anymore, spoiler alert. This is going to be the last warning. If you do not want to be spoiled for the end of this book, click off now. Okay. So, Moira goes into a little bit of a depression, and she's really, really heavily resenting Collie. And she reaches her breaking point. She locks her up in the bathroom, takes out the light bulb so that it's completely dark, and tells her she's going to be in there for 2 days as punishment. She calls it the cave. And that turns out is how she punishes her. And Collie is afraid of the dark. And this is even more sadistic because in the beginning, her and her sister were thrown into the trunk of the car. And even though she doesn't know why, that is why she is so scared of the dark. So to put her in the dark for days at a time as a punishment, knowing why she is scared of the dark, is even more sadistic in my opinion. It's like, no, you can't do that. So she does that. She starts the gas on the stove and then just decides to go into town with the gas going on, with this girl locked in this room. Luckily, Jay is right across the street, and he sees Moira tear out of there like her hair's on fire, basically. And he gets his first good look at her, and he realizes he recognizes her from the town that Claire lives in around the time that the girls went missing. And all of a sudden, it's like a switch is turned on in his mind. It's like, she was there. They migrate everywhere. This girl doesn't go to school. She's admitted to me that's not her mother. She's the right age. And there's something familiar about her. And instantly, he knows this is Andrea. This is his friend's long-lost daughter, who everybody thinks is dead. So he rushes over to the house to talk to her, and he smells the gas. And instantly he knows something is wrong. She's not answering the door. She's not coming to the door. He smells the gas. So he starts trying to break into the trailer home. And it takes a while because he can't get in through the windows because they're too high for him. But he can see her as she managed to break free of the bathroom. But now it's like she's stuck in the paneling in between the bathroom and her bedroom. And she's trying to free herself. So he talks her through, gives her the strength to pull herself through and get over to the window so that he can help her out. And it's just in the nick of time before the trailer just blows up. And now chaos ensues, and this is where things go dramatically downhill for me. Because that was very intense. It was very intricate. The detail on it was amazing. I loved that part of the book. It was probably my favorite part of the book. And then everything after occurs. And I'm sorry, I'm going to rant a little bit here because there's some things in here that is just like personal preference that I didn't like. You very well might, but there's some things with the ending that bothered me very, very badly. So they get to the hospital, and Jay is like, he had broken his ankle trying to free her, so he has to go in for reconstructive surgery. And it's like he's telling the paramedics all the way through in the ambulance, she's kidnapped. And instead of thinking it's the child that he just helped, they're thinking he's talking about the mother, her mother, the woman. They're not listening to him. And then they go in to interview this poor traumatized little girl that she just had this go happen with somebody she heavily trusted. She's been told by Jay before like the ambulance came and the police and everything that she is not Collie, that she's Andrea. So this is a lot for a 9-year-old to have to try to absorb all at one time. And she is kind of in shock. So the doctors and the social workers and everybody come in to talk to her. And the very first thing they ask her is, did Jay hurt you? This bothered me on so many levels because I'm like, yes, he's a man. Yes, he befriended this child. But 1, he saved her life. And 2, he literally told you she was kidnapped. And that's the first question you're going to ask. Luckily, they believed her when she said no. And when she asked about Moira, where's Moira? They said, is that your mom? And she said no. And it was only then that it clicked for them that he said she was kidnapped and she's been living with a woman named Moira, that it's not her mother. Maybe that's what's going on. So they do DNA testing, and it's like when Jay gets out of surgery, they finally listen to him and they contact Claire and her ex-husband. So I felt like it took way too long for them to be contacted because they were literally told immediately who this child was. It's not like they didn't know. So that just really, really bothered me. I was starting to think that they weren't going to listen at all. But they get contacted and told, we think your daughter's alive. We don't know. We're waiting on the DNA testing. But she's been identified by a friend of yours. So it's like they immediately get in the car and rush to this hospital that is 3 hours away, I believe it is. And that doesn't bother me. So they finally get there. They finally get to go in the room and see her. The social worker asks them, is there anything that you can tell us that we might use to make a positive identification before the DNA comes back? Birthmarks, anything. Rather than tell them this information that they can examine her body and see if she has, Claire starts going on about how her mother used to sew charms, good luck charms, into dresses, and how how Andrea was wearing one of those dresses the day she disappeared. And Andrea looks up. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't say mama. She doesn't, nothing, not a single word. Just uncurls her hand, and there's this charm sitting in it. And that is how they know this is the right child. What? Seriously, what? 1, how would Claire have any way of knowing that Andrea would still have part of this dress? I mean, she knew that the dress burned up in the fire because that's why the police believed that she was dead to begin with, because they found the charred remains of the dress. So why would she think this child or this social worker would know anything about the charm that was in this dress? That was a fluke. Collie found it in the trunk of the car one day when they were doing laundry. Claire didn't have any way of knowing that. For all she knew, the charm was gone in the fire. For the life of me, if your kid has been gone for 5 years and you finally think you found him and you're asked for identifying information, that's what you're going to choose? And just hope that it works? No, I'd be going over every mark in their bodies, everything that happened when they were a baby, every injury, any scar they might have, everything. No, she tells about the dress and the charm and just gets lucky. I can't even describe how much that bothers me. So, Collie having this charm is the identifying factor. So everybody's happy, they're hugging, they're crying. I turn the page, and what do I see? Acknowledgements. That was how this book ended. Absolutely no information on Moira. She did not pay for this, as far as we know. She did not pay for this. She got away scot-free. I mean, from the ending of the book, it sounded like nobody was even concerned about her, which I don't understand. It's like she took this child and damn near killed her. But nobody seems overly concerned with finding her. And that's literally how the book ended. And it's like, even if they know this is their daughter for sure because of the charm, she's not going to openly accept you as her family. She doesn't know you. It's like there should have been more focus on the trauma from Andrea, Collie, whatever you want to call her at this point in her life. I wanted to see at least another chapter from her point of view, how she was feeling, how she was dealing with this major shift in her life. And I wanted to see Moira brought to justice, or at least die in a fiery car crash as karma for what she did to this kid. But nothing. It was just a great big happy ending, and I don't buy it. Too much went down for it to be a happy ending. It's like, yes, I'm glad she found her family, because she deserved that, but it wouldn't have been like an instant, I know you, I love you type of thing, especially at her age. That is just not realistic. She still does not know these people. They are strangers to her. And this has to be traumatizing for her. So, I mean, maybe that's just a personal thing and other people wouldn't mind it so much, but for me, that is just kind of lazy storytelling. I kind of feel like that's a lazy ending. And at first, I thought that it might have been a setup for a sequel, so I looked it up, and no, this is not only the only book in this series, because it's not a series, but it's the only book this author has written. And it came out 2 years ago, so there's no announcements for another one. So to me, it looks as though this was meant to be a standalone. But there were too many plot holes, and too many loose ends for me to be extremely happy with this. Like I said, the parts that were good were great. There were some very intense moments in here, some gripping moments, good character development. Like, all of the characters were well-rounded and well-written. But that ending seemed forced and choppy, and the whole middle section, it seemed almost like she didn't know what to do. So she was just like biding time until she could get to the climax. So if that was the case, maybe this should have been just a little bit shorter. And it's short already. It's not even 300 pages, but it still felt like it was longer than it needed to be. So I was going to give this book a 3. But because that ending pissed me off the way that it did, I'm dropping it down to a 2. I'm sorry. I still think this is worth the read. it's just mediocre. But it's a relatively good plot line, and it does have some inventive things in it, so it's worth the read. I'm not saying you should never read this. It's one of the worst things that I've ever read, because that's simply not true. There's just some pretty major faults with it, in my personal opinion. Alright, so that is all that I have for you guys today. If you liked this video, please make sure to comment, like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias that I have linked down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!